That's got to be you over there, Vicky. Welcome aboard. Great show there. You just concluded. Good topic, good discussion, and so forth. I need to probably turn this freaking phone off because more than likely there'll always be an interruption if the opportunity is granted. All right, we had a kind of request a couple of days ago to talk about something that we're dealing with in the rather small and remote community that I am located in, and that is whether to wear a mask or not wear a mask when you're in locations that are not necessarily heavily populated. You've already got, because of population density, you're already kind of self isolating or socially distancing, for that politically correct term. When is it okay to wear a mask? When is it not okay to wear a mask? And that is something that we're all dealing with. And it's hard to go onto YouTube, not YouTube, to Facebook and not see that discussion coming up now and again, across so many different platforms and zones. And so I'm going to be honest with you. I don't wear a mask when I go outside. Even if we had kind of company come over, you can stand a distance apart and the breeze is blowing. You can always be upwind, downwind from each other, whatever makes you comfortable. And it feels okay. The sunshine and the fresh air already being a bit of an antiseptic. And I know that millions are counting on that. There was already the impression that you could go outside, or let's just start back and say that as the weather changed from winter, when we were largely stuck indoors, it was cool, it was damp, to one of outside and fresh air, that we would see a reduction in cases. And there were examples, whether they were true or not, of different climates, different countries where the case count was lower. And because every county, every state, every nation does not report the same case count in the same methodology, I find it rather difficult to use that as a benchmark as to whether the virus is spreading. There are numerous stories, again, visiting social media, people's firsthand experiences, that one person could feel a little sketchy. They go get a test. They come back, and if that test is negative or not, and in this particular case it was negative, that they used contact tracing to come back, and the 20 some odd people that this person had been in close contact were all then labeled COVID positive without a test. So there's some padding of the numbers. There's some playing with it, because there's money to be involved. There's money for the hospitals. There's money for the positive diagnosis. So there's not, from top to bottom of this experience, an altruistic of dealing with and sharing with the people, the best information, the truest information. There's another agenda at play, and that's kind of scary. And Karen says, I'm very pleased that 90% of the Yorkers I'm seeing are all still wearing masks. That is nice. That is reassuring to kind of to go out. And then if that virus, if they're positive and they've gone out unknowingly, or knowingly gone out unknowing that they're positive, then if they're happy to be spreading it, then that is kind of a good thing. Vicky commenting that because I live rurally, I feel okay now wearing a not. Now, I'm going to say that's not wearing a mask outside, but as soon as I'm in public, I wear a mask. Yeah, I'm kind of the same ilk. That just seems to be the best way to approach this beast. So let's pop into this little slideshow. You know me, I'm famous for the slideshows. To mask or not to mask. And this isn't a Shakespeare kind of event. I kind of wish it were. These kind of masks just simply didn't exist 6-7 months ago, unless you were, overseas, and particularly in Asia where that happened. And now masking is a whole other business. It's a new business that is kind of raging. And you can get the surgical masks. You can find the N95 masks, those one with a filter of a certain size that may or may not be able to block the virus. I've seen contradictory information with that. But nonetheless, a whole industry has popped up around this. And now that we're some 6 months into this event, we've got a sufficient masks. Now, whether you can afford one, that becomes another issue. As I was looking for mask pictures, this came up. 1994 mural from the Freemasons Armageddon headquarters, so already kind of labeling it. The Denver International Airport has a photograph or a mural of all of us of all the different nations. So, wearing a mask with the respective flags as that mask. So you have to wonder if this hasn't been, as there was one documentary out there a while back, a pandemic. So it's kind of curious to see this in play. So it really comes back to the science of the mask, the chance of transmission. If it's high, you've got the dude out there that is a little sick, that is exuding aerosolized, stuff out of your mouth, coughing, sneezing, so forth and so on. And then the dude that he's run into, the gal, the moron who is choosing to go out, encountering somebody that is sick, and then not taking appropriate protective action. And they labeled it the moron. So the stupid risk. High is still the psychos out there knowingly spreading. And we saw that in I don't know how many YouTubes in China. People could or could not have been positive, but deliberately spreading their bodily fluids in elevators, on railings. It was a deliberate spreading of whatever they had. And so that would be why you would want to go out with masks and even gloves at that particular point. If you lived in an urban area and you were dealing with that kind of consciousness, let's just say. So the medium risk is that the infected person that would be breathing and sharing his bodily gases, if you will, out with the public. If that person is wearing a mask, then it's just a medium risk. And then for low is when both of them are masked, and very low if they include social distancing, and then virtually none if we did the flatten the curve dance and they just stayed at home. And this is kind of what's more curious or more interesting from the scientific aspect of things, that the bacteria from respiratory droplets spread by one sneeze. And you can see in the medium that it's pretty covered and it's growing rather quickly. And when you're masked, that just doesn't get the velocity to get the transmission distance. And then that mask does catch a lot of that thing. And this is why if you didn't have a mask, then the sneezing into the elbows is far more appropriate, because then you're reducing the spray that you're leaving behind. From a person singing for a minute, you're much, much less likely to spread than a sneeze. And so this is sneezing and coughing needs to be protected. Talking, still going to have some spray off the tongue, off the top palate, off the teeth, and so forth and so on with the P's and the T's. And then 2 coughs with no mask. And with a mask, it makes such a difference. And that's the importance of simply wearing a mask in public. The other risk is that we're seeing this virus changing. This virus is being altered. And this came out literally within the last week, as the virus behind COVID-19 causes infected cells now to sprout tentacles, which allow the virus to attack several nearby cells at once, literally poking holes in the nearby cells, which allow the virus to become far more easily transferred. This nightmare fuel was discovered by researchers led by University of California, San Francisco. And he said, quote, "There are long strings that poke holes into other cells, and viruses then pass through the tube from cell to cell," said UCSF's Director of Quantitative Biosciences Institute. "Our hypothesis is that this would spread up infection." And if this is not how it began and has evolved to this, then the virus is not weakening as it gets out into the population, as it gets into the human body and goes from human to human to human, something that the WHO simply said was not possible, and we'll touch that in a moment. So most viruses do not cause infected cells to grow these tentacles. Even those that do, such as smallpox, do not have as many or the same type of branching as SARS-CoV-2, the virus behind COVID-19. And according to the report, the silver lining is that the tentacle discovery may pave the way for a number of drugs to work against the disease, most of which were previously being used to treat cancer. It totally makes sense that there's an overlap in the anti-cancer drugs and the antiviral effects, said Professor Kogan, who added that cancers, HIV, and SARS-CoV-2 are all searching for the Achilles heel of the particular cell. So it's like there's 2 outcomes for this, and it's almost like there's an agenda, because they wanted us to encounter this disease. They wanted us to encounter the virus. And then there's a multitude of reasons why that may be true. So we have to kind of dig deeper into the agenda of what they would want to roll out for us if there is an uncontrolled virus out on the loose. Ebola an engineered virus. HIV, an engineered virus. And when you bring that kind of a virus that has had no exposure to the human body, it's going to act in unpredictable ways. So then either we get sick and we get antibodies, which it's not known how long those can last in the system, since we're finding and seeing people, and there are many examples, that get reinfected or come down with the sickness once again. So is the vaccination, is that truly the holy grail to where we can be vaccinated once, create an immune body response, and then be able to walk about unmasked? The other risk is, and this is what we're seeing out in the field, is that we get infected, the body either deflects it, incorporates the antibodies, and the younger you are, the healthier your immune response is going to be. But then does that immune response, like chickenpox or smallpox, then last the rest of your life? And that is the unknown, and that makes this course of action for me very questionable, because then there's a whole lot of money that changes hands from one side to another. Geez, that image is scary when it shows how far beyond your body fluids spread. It's true. This is why I'm so grateful to end up in a somewhat remote area where you have businesses that are rather strict in dealing with lines and grocery shopping and restaurants. There are ways to keep our distance so we don't run into someone else's bodily spray, if you will. Mutation is a scary concept, but all viruses mutate, especially RNA viruses, and this is kind of why we see a different flu vaccine every year. And something else that is curious, and I do not have a slide up for that, is how those soldiers, because we have a control group of patients, of subjects who did get flu vaccines after 2018 that had coronavirus in them, they're 38% more likely to have a larger effect from this virus. So it's kind of unfortunate, along with very interesting and quite frightening at the same time. True, and sad truth, Karen. And exactly, mutation tends to take it to another level, but we don't know which one. What direction will the mutation tend to run? And so recently we've, surprise, the European Commission, the EC, has a roadmap to vaccination ready months before COVID-19 pandemic broke out. The roadmap should lead to a Commission proposal for a common vaccine card and passport for EU citizens by the year 2020. This was last updated during the third quarter of 19. And the 10-page document was followed on September 12th by a global vaccination summit jointly hosted by the EC and the World Health Organization under the header 10 Actions Towards Vaccines for All. Everyone should be able to benefit from the power of vaccination. The summit manifesto lamented that despite the availability of safe and effective vaccines, lack of access, vaccine shortages, misinformation, complacency towards disease risks, diminishing public confidence in the value of vaccines, and disinvestments are harming vaccine rates worldwide. Now, there's a whole level of commentary that could be brought to the table about disease risk, and especially from diminished public confidence in the value of vaccines. And it probably begins with, this is another slide I wanted to get, the vaccine manufacturer immunity that was brought or made legal in 1988, that those vaccine manufacturers, at least in the United States, have an immunity from responsibility from misuse or side effects from their vaccines. And that can lead to a lot of mistrust. And this is exactly why I'm feeling that the public isn't on board. And in fact, Germany, there was a big pushback against mandatory vaccinations. All right, this is going to play out on the economic side of things. And one of the things that has come to my attention in the last 10 days or so is probably, and maybe it wasn't intentional, but this is a kind of an issue that's popped up and has become very visible, and that is a national coin shortage here in the United States. The Federal Reserve is rationing to banks coin shipments. Wells Fargo has limited coins available, and we're encouraging customers to deposit rolled coins to assist with this shortage. Most every home probably has a jar sitting somewhere of coins collected because it's such a pain in the behind to load them up the next day when you go out to do your daily business, whether it's to work, whether it's to lunch. And so most homes have this collection of coins. And it's probably time that we emptied those coin jars and got those coins back into circulation. So it's what the Fed is dealing or admitted to lawmakers last week is that the Fed has begun to ration coins as the circulation of coins across the U.S. economy continues to grind to a halt due to the pandemic. What's happened is that with the partial closure of the economy, the flow of coins through the economy, it's kind of stopped, said Jerome Powell to the lawmakers. He said the shortage was due to the mass business closures that have prevented people from spending their coins, as well as the lack of places that are open where people can then trade their coins for paper bills. We've been aware of it, he says. We're working with the Mint to increase supply. We're working with the reserve banks to get the supply to where it needs to be, adding that he expected this problem to remain temporary. America's Googling coin shortage started to erupt the back half of June and has since hit a record high. Mainly people in the Midwest states are searching for the term. Even companies like Lowe's and quite a few grocery stores for that are telling their customers before they come into the store with cash in hand, either go visit our kiosk or customer service so we can deal with this knowingly before you show up with one of the checkers with your haul for the day, or you've got to use a debit card. So it's being reported that some businesses around the country are putting up signs asking their customers to either pay with exact change or with a card. And in a little bit of humor, first to go were masks, then toilet paper, and now there's a national coin shortage. The 7-Eleven on Oakwood has a sign asking customers to pay in exact change by card. So we're seeing in Tioga County, Pennsylvania, mentioning that there's a coin shortage throughout the area. Some businesses like Lowe's in Mansfield, Pennsylvania, have posted signs on their stores to inform their customers before they check out with their purchases. And we're kind of stunned to hear that cash has been temporarily banned. Cash temporarily won't be accepted at Mayher self-checkout lanes due to a national shortage of change. Kind of curious that this could lead to a cash or a ban on cash. Kind of curious how one issue then begins to lead to another. Yeah, Robin commenting, whoa, not completely trusting vaccines at this time. And if we weren't demanding mothers to give vaccines to newborns and to children where their bodies aren't old enough, mature enough, developed enough to actually deal with and create an immune response for the vaccine that's being given. If the schedule was similar to what it was in the 60s when I was, first vaccinated, I think the pushback from vaccines would be far, far less intense. And I don't anticipate that it's going to go away probably anytime soon. So as we roll in from shortage of cash and coins, and an example is this coinage not getting back into the system. Restaurants had the highest number of business closures compared to other industries and have continued to close at high rates. This from Yelp. Of the businesses that closed, 17% of restaurants and 53% of those restaurant closures are indicated as permanent on Yelp. Restaurants run on thin margins and sometimes can take months or even years to break even after their initial opening, and this resulting in a higher rate of permanent closures. And from the 1st of March up through 15 June, shopping and retail outlets, we've seen 27,600 closures and 35% of the permanent, and restaurants nearly 24,000 closures and 53% of those permanent. Beauty and spa kind of businesses, 15,000 closures and 24% of the permanent thus far. And fitnesses, gyms, spas, those kind of locations, 5,500 closures, and a quarter of them, just a hair over a quarter of them, appear to be permanent. So how do we get things to open back up? Is wearing a mask enough? Is it going to take a vaccination before the government gives us permission to go back out? And then what if that vaccination doesn't work, even if we've opened back up? So this closure works across all industries, from outdoor activities that became very popular at the height of the pandemic as people were finding ways to stay active while continuing to social distance, such as mountain biking, now down from its peak of 40%, golfing down 34%, hiking down 28%, and they have dropped in activity and consumer interest since the 1st of May relative to other activities where people are beginning to feel more comfortable participating in indoor activities with increased consumer interest for escape games up 182%, go-karts up 147%, axe throwing, I didn't really realize that was a thing, up 113%, and those gyms up 81%. So we're beginning to see some of those indoor recreational businesses beginning to get some business back. But the real risk is that we deal with the second wave and how that second wave eventually plays out. So what we're seeing is Dr. Fauci's warnings of up to 100,000 new cases per day has clearly rattled the GOP. The GOP wanting to get business back up and running and some sense of normalcy returning to the economy. Because if they stayed shut for longer periods of times, then most businesses that didn't get bailouts would see only one future, and that of shutting down permanently. So the question is, can these businesses survive at 50% capacity? Can they negotiate lower rents? Can they negotiate lower interest costs and insurance costs? Can they negotiate lower taxes on 50% revenue? Can they run the business with that kind of a smaller staff? Or are some of them only 4, 5, 6 person staff businesses, and that cutting that back by half just means the business can't run at all because you need these particular persons in these particular stations? So that's something that, I kind of find kind of curious. Other nations doing better than others, but across the globe, the push upwards is definitely building. The U.S., we flattened the wave for a little bit, the curve, and now it is building. Brazil, no, they came in and started rather late, and they're still accentuating or still building on that first wave. Russia had an incredible ramp up, and now they've trailed off. Iran had that huge surge in the beginning, and they're kind of building up to what will probably be a long haul of infections. The UK, a big surge, and now they've trailed up. Germany, an exceptional response to the virus, but now there are ought or are not, or there are zero every infected case, and how many persons does that one case then reinfect? And that number has been well below 1/2 for Germany. So that's been very, very good. And then China, their data, as far as I'm concerned, is literally just missing. They were huge in the beginning, and then they've gone dark ever since. Whatever's really happening over there, we may not know until some data somewhere, somehow gets leaked. And then we've got numerous states continuing to deal with the close-up, and some that open very, very strongly. Arizona now reclosing the bars, gyms, movie theaters, water parks, and the order the governor acknowledged that there has not been sufficient time for mask mandates and limiting groups to have a demonstrable effect on containing the spread, and as a result, the state must take further measures to contain the virus. And the governor remains pessimistic. And there's a lot of states that are in that exact same situation. Banks are flying blind. They don't know how to fund what's happening, as the unemployment office and the credit reporting agencies not really being honest with a person's current credit risk, and so banks are pulling back on everything. And then we've got kind of funky, crazy stories, with healthcare workers, with the testing, and that we're seeing infected tests. We saw that in the very beginning coming in from China, these nations in Europe buying Chinese tests, and people ended up positive from the test, and they test the test kits, and the test kits are coming back positive. So what we're seeing in numerous locations, and this is why I think that there's really kind of a much, much larger agenda behind this, and that, well, one way or another, or there's a vaccination, an encounter with the disease, or something else at the end of it. But we're seeing zero cases, and then mandatory testing shows up, particularly in healthcare situations. And then we end up with unexpected positives, and then people end up truly positive from the test. And so this is happening in numerous locations. And we had a little bit of a whistleblower, president of Ghana, within the month, literally reading the agenda of what's happening, and a link to his video And his accent is thick. It's worth listening to twice. There's some really good nuggets in there to kind of what he sees happening. And the biggest risk that he's now laying out is the second wave. The loss of liberties then follows suit. And then food. Food. And this is, for my eyes, one of the reasons why the economy, regardless of the cost, needed to be open for a bit. And that was to kind of reestablish, re-engineer the food supply system. And that especially so as we have, farmers working the fields, and healthcare and the migrant workers have got to be in place to really help out this system. So this is the new normal now. Every ad, commercial, news report now has the line, "the new normal" in it. This is textbook social conditioning. Introduce an idea and keep repeating it until it is accepted as normal. And here we are again. This is the new normal. So do we have solutions? And if there are solutions out there, will we hear about them? Or is the new normal too important? So we've got a couple of doctors. This just one, Vladimir Zelenko. He's been in New York City. He uses a regimen of 200 milligrams of hydroxychloroquine twice a day, 500 milligrams of azithromycin once a day, and 220 milligrams of zinc sulfate once a day, and do it for 5 days. The doctor from Monroe, New York, has used this on over 400 patients with symptoms and has had 100% success. So don't be confused by the conflicting stories about people eating fish tank cleaner. And we all heard that a little while back ago, and that was the mainstream media's push to keep this story at bay. So this tiny little pill may actually be the solution for this virus. And something else that's curious about the hydroxychloroquine is its effect on cancer. So strange times these in which we live, when old and young are taught falsehoods in school. The person that dares tell them is called at once a lunatic and a fool. And here we are as we wind up another episode of Another Perspective. And the truth is always out there. It's a matter of, if you discovered the truth, if you understood the truth, if you could live with that information, it's how it would change your life that they don't necessarily want to have happen with us and for us. All right, everybody, thanks for stopping by the room, Vicky, Robin, Candy, and so forth. Love you guys, and we'll see you tonight on a look at Scott's weather, and then next Monday for another episode of Another Perspective. Take care, everybody. Keep looking up.